presenters would expect to be able to be Can't steal it very far. Hold your finger
No,
down.
don't do that.
Okay.
Don't ever touch anything on the controller. Okay, there you go. Yeah, you just swipe it away. You have an agenda? You're good? It should have launched. Yeah. Teamwork. Thank you.
No.
All right. Okay, we're in business.
All right. Well, thank you for your patience. We are conquering technical problems as we move forward in this hybrid setting. I'd like to call the planning board meeting of April 4th, 2024 to order. Introduction of planning board members and staff. We're going to start on my far right, Hank McCarl, Sean, Doug, David, Beverly. I'm Rick Noonan. We've got our planning director, Greg Catamatori, our vice chair, Jane Ramson, and our senior planner, Eric. First on the agenda this evening are A&Rs, site plan reviews, and preliminary subdivision plans. First, under this heading is an approval not required plan submitted by Francis Goodhue to divide property at 30 Atlantic Ave, Assessor's Map 254, Lot 3. So, any representation on this A&R?
I'm bringing John Judd in as a panelist.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, John Judd, engineer with Gateway Consultants for this minor A&R modification plan to the existing property known as 30 Atlantic Avenue. This is a small parcel to be carved out and donated to the Wingershik Upper Beach Association from the new Greenbelt parcel known as that surrounds Sleepy Hollow Pond. And Greg, I'm not sure if you have it up or if yeah, I could certainly bring it up.
Yep.
Thank you. So you can just see there's a very small parcel that's going to be surrounding the guard shack, and that's just a formality. It's labeled unbuildable. It's you know, the Greenbelt doesn't want to take possession of this donated parcel without that being memorialized by the planning board. So that's essentially what we're here for, is an unbuildable. They're actually both parcel A and parcel B are unbuildable and labeled as such, but it's simply just to make that recorded. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Do we have any questions from board members on the A&R?
I'll just note back when the original division of that property occurred, they outlined this as a potential to occur, but it wasn't actually identified as a parcel, so it was never created by the assessing department and not clear in the record at the Registry of Deeds. So it's a pretty minor change just to remove that so that Greenbelt only owns land that's going to be held in conservation.
And I'm assuming all of the setbacks are met around the building?
That
You
is,
speak to that, John.
sure, yeah. So what we have is it's not a permanent structure. It's a shed Jane, that it's been in existence as long as I've been around. So that is an existing nonconformity. Obviously, when a plan is endorsed, the zoning compliance is not endorsed by the planning board, as you know. So it's a pre-existing nonconformity, and it's again a very small shed that can be moved at any time.
Thank you.
It's used, it was supposed to be used, I think, as a guardhouse. It seems to be drive by and there's a window, but no one is ever there, I think.
Oh,
So, yeah, that's why it's where it is, right at the entryway of that subdivision.
Thank you, Beverly. Any other questions, comments? Want to take a stab, Jane?
Yes. I move that we approve the A&R plan for 30 Atlantic Avenue.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call. We don't need
All
a
in
roll call?
favor?
All in favor. Oh, look at that. All in favor, say aye.
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 Noes? Hearing none. Passes unanimously. Voice vote.
Thanks, John.
All right, thank you all very much.
Next under the agenda is a pre-application review, Village Development Overlay District filed by Joel Favaza on behalf of Roger LeBlanc for 3, 6, and 7 Welch Lane and 644 Essex Avenue and rear Woodman Street, map 237, lots 114, 109, 4, 121, and 79. So we have the Attorney Favaza here in person. Thank you for your attendance, and I believe your applicant is online as well.
Yes, so for the record, Joel Favaza, Seaside Legal Solutions, 123 Main Street, here on behalf of Roger LeBlanc, trustee owner of 3, 6, and 7 Welch Lane and 644 Essex Avenue. He is in attendance via Zoom tonight. So I'm kind of curious how the board wants to proceed. We were here in January. I kind of ran through the proposed village development plan. We got hung up on a technicality and sent back to do a little more homework. And so hopefully you've all had a chance to review the second conventional plan that we sent over. I believe it was sent beginning of March, and then there was a recent write-up that was filed on the 21st of March, kind of explaining how that works. And so at this point, I'm hoping we can get to like the meat and potatoes of the village development proposal that we're here to try and get some feedback on. But I can, if the board would like, quickly kind of walk through that basic maximum number of dwelling units, if that's still of concern. Okay. So in the GZO, one of the things that the planning board is tasked with in reviewing a village development proposal is to determine what the maximum number of allowed units would be on the site through a quote unquote conventional plan. And that means, per the GZO, the number of dwelling units which could reasonably be expected to be developed upon the site in conformance with all zoning, subdivision, et cetera, et cetera. So this does not mean that it has to be by right development. What you were trying to do is look at what could be reasonably expected to be developed up here. And so the two.
Well, hang on one
Sure.
second. Can you just cite for the people who are listening and there's nothing on the screen here,
Sure.
that's 5.16.3.3 of the,
GZO.
whatever the heck it's called. No, the business development
Village.
village
Yes.
development overlay.
Yeah, section 5.16.3.3 of the GZO, which is in the village development section, which is all of 5.16 is village development.
Right. And this is the definition of how
It's the
many units
definition
are allowed.
Of the determination you have to make. And so it's you know, at the outset, you need to be clear that it doesn't say how many units are allowed by right. It just says what could reasonably be developed up there. And so the first conventional plan we offered was an A&R plan that would consolidate all the lots into a single parcel and then require a major project special permit from the city council to put the same 13 four-family houses that we're proposing on the site. However, without the village regulations, these houses needed to be further apart from each other, had to have more pavement, et cetera. And so we, again, had kind of explained last time, it would seem to make more sense that the village provides a more appealing for both the development and the developer strategy for getting these 13 buildings on site. There was some concern as to whether conventional plan meant conventional subdivision plan. And again, you can go through the zoning ordinance, you'll find where the zoning ordinance calls for a conventional subdivision plan, and this isn't one of them. But for the sake of trying to, not spend all day tackling this, we went and had the engineers put together a conventional subdivision plan also. And that shows 18 lots. You'll notice that lot 11 is actually just an A&R lot that comes off of Essex Avenue. But otherwise, there was room up there for 18 conforming R10 lots. And so as simply a matter of right, that's 36 housing units, dwelling units you could expect. And again, with only a single special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals on these lots, you could go to 3-family. And so we said, again, given that these lots all conform, these footprints for the houses all conform, the roadway is compliant, et cetera, that you could reasonably anticipate, given the housing crisis that we're in, if we were to go to the zoning board and say, hey, we'd like a special permit per 1.8.3 to go from 2 to 3 units on all of these lots, that we'd be able to get that permit. Again, you can go through that 7-factor test in your head while you try and go through this, but at the end of the day, the city council has recently made 3 families easier to access. Used to require a city council permit and more intense setback regulations to go up to 3 units. A couple of years ago, they took away all of that, and the R5 and the R10 district made a 3-family no different than a 2-family or a 1-family as far as setbacks, lot area per dwelling unit, et cetera. So given that, if you want to use conventional plan to mean conventional subdivision plan, we've now shown we can get 18 conventional lots. And on each of those lots, you can reasonably expect 3 dwelling units on each, and that would be 54 dwelling units, which is 2 more than the 52 we're proposing under the village development plan. The reason that's important is because you need to decide whether or not we are in need of a density bonus. And as I mentioned back in January, we're not actually using the village apparatus for a density bonus. We're not actually trying to put more units on site than otherwise would be allowed. We're looking to access the reduction in the stringent requirements for building separation, for roadway, that sort of thing. And so it just made sense to use the village apparatus to make this a little more of a condensed site. We couldn't do a cluster because the site won't orient in a way that you could do enough separate clusters. As you recall from previous cluster developments, each cluster can only have a maximum of 10 single or 2-family or a maximum of 4 multifamily. So to get these same 13 buildings on site would require 4 separate clusters, and this site just was not conducive to that sort of arrangement. So that's why it couldn't be a cluster, but the village does check the boxes as far as providing the ability to put these buildings a little closer together, put them in a little more of a pragmatic orientation, and in doing so, preserve more open space on the site, reduce pavement, et cetera. Beyond that, as was submitted back in January, you have a full stormwater report showing that the village development complies with all the performance standards for stormwater runoff. You also have a full traffic report showing that the sight lines down Essex Avenue are more than sufficient and that the potential impact to traffic flow on the state highway is pretty much a blip. And so if we have any questions about those logistical things, I'm happy to talk about it. Otherwise, I would love, and Greg, if you want to throw the site plan up when we get into a conversation. Oh, sorry.
I just want to clarify for everybody that because duplexes are allowed by right, when you have 18 lots, you could have 18 duplexes, a total of 36?
Yeah, so
So that with this new 3-unit detached, we're going from 36 to 54, not from 18 to 54.
But only by special permit.
right.
But I mean, the point is, I'm just.
Yes.
Density that's allowed in the zone. Okay.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
wanted-
The underlying density would be as by right 36 dwelling units.
In the letter that was in our package, there was a letter from Attorney Fine, talked about the sewer and that there was an issue with sewer capacity that had already been limited from a decision many years ago. Can you speak to that?
Yes, and so I am in receipt of that letter. I'll speak to that question. Given this isn't a public hearing, I thought it wouldn't be fair for me to kind of get up and just attack the letter and not have them have any ability to respond. But as far as that, the sewer permit, I believe it was attached as an exhibit, basically says you're not allowed to go beyond what your plan shows. And that was, at the time, that was the number of, that is not a perpetual, you can never put more units up here, you can never put more bedrooms up here. It's saying the submission you've provided us at this time shows X units, X bedrooms, and the permission we're granting you is limited to what you've applied for. And so we couldn't rely on that grant of a permit now and just turn all 52 units on, right? We'd have to connect. I imagine the DPW is going to want a connection fee for every one of these units. It's one of the ways the DPW, helps subsidize the cost of the sewer system, et cetera. And so the limitation in that permit was only speaking to, in my understanding, what was applied for at the time, not a prohibition against ever applying for and receiving permission to connect additional units.
So the short answer is you'll demonstrate how to connect the units and have the capacity to tie to city sewer.
Yeah, it would, the application would be dead in the water otherwise. If we got to that stage and DPW said, oh, hey, we can't have these units, then I'm coming back here because now I have to show you how septic works. But again, anecdotally, the sewer treatment plant processes several million gallons a day fewer than it did as recently as the 1990s. So there, from speaking to the actual people running the sewer treatment plant, there's not a capacity issue regarding inflow. And then, as you all know, the city's embarking upon a major upgrade to that facility. And one of the things this administration has talked about is not just correcting the lack of secondary treatment, but also making sure that there is capacity for additional growth the city might see. So I think it's okay as is now, and things are only looking to get better on the sewer side of things as we go.
So a procedural question, and this is for Greg, maybe. Are we being asked to look at a plan and approve a plan before we have, the city has weighed in whether there actually is capacity?
I think we're even way before that. This is just a pre-application. There's the underlying zoning district. There's the potential for a cluster development, a conventional subdivision, and I emphasize that, or this potential zoning which provides for the village development project. So at this stage, it's really kind of trying to cover some of the baseline questions. And I think one of the biggest ones that we had coming out of the first meeting that this was discussed was trying to get at that, what is the base density that's considered in a formal application. So that's really one of the gatekeeper questions, I think, at least probably for the applicant's consideration. I mean, if there's a smaller project, that has fewer units in it, that's something that the board would entertain as well. But in this case, it's really trying to understand that kind of gatekeeper question of what is the base density that could be considered, and then the ordinance provides for ways to exceed that density if there's a give and take, either with affordable housing or conserved open space. So in the first approach, it was a one lot multifamily application that was used as the baseline. Feedback was provided. And in this case, it's a coupling of a land division through a subdivision as well as special permits, and whether or not that's the approach. And I think if we went back to the videotape, one of the comments that was made, the last point was, given the concern around trying to create housing, if the conventional approach was taken at its face, as has been outlined by Beverly, whatever that number of lots times 2 would be the baseline, which would be the 36 units. So that's, I think, one of the gatekeeper questions. Is the baseline 36 with a conventional subdivision plan that would also potentially be waiverless? I mean, I don't know that we're going that far to review it from every single aspect, but is it conceivable, 50-foot layout, dimensional requirements, the number of lots that could be created, And then what's the underlying as of right zoning, which would be a two. This has been extended to 18 special permits for three family.
Is this, oh, okay. So on that note, I can sort of buy into the 36 unit count because it's basically a by right thing to do a two-family. But, and maybe there's evidence it's been used in the past, but in my mind, the ZBA special permit is utilized on a one-off situation. I'm a homeowner or I'm a developer. I want to put in a new three-family. I get my ZBA special permit for that, not for the creation of a subdivision of three-family homes. And again, you're a lawyer, not me, but I would think that if you're using the special permit process, that it wouldn't be one special permit for all 18 lots. It would be 18 individual special permits to achieve the three-family use, correct?
I agree. You'd have 18 applications, 18 filing fees, and they'd all be taken on their merit. But again, if you look at the fact that these would be dimensionally compliant, which is both like meaning setbacks, height, and as far as lot area per dwelling unit, right? In the in the R10 district, up to three family, it's only 2,000 square feet of lot area per dwelling unit. And each of these lots are somewhere north of 10,000, which again, just using that as the density number. I'm not saying it's actually feasible because other things trickle in, but at 2,000 square feet, you know, there was room for more smaller lots. Again, the feasibility of the site didn't make any sense, but in any event, so you get to the special permit criteria of 1.8.3, and it's, again, is what's being proposed in harmony with the intent of the zoning ordinance. You start right off by going, well, what's the R10 district called? The medium high density residential district. And I would argue that three families on basically lots with twice as much lot area as was required for a three family would be in line with what the medium high density residential district was looking for. You get through social economic things. Again, the more units you can put on, the more modest they can be in price, the more availability they can have to, you know, to be aligned more with workforce housing and more, you know, blue collar, middle class housing, et cetera. And then I would have you ask questions about traffic flow and safety, and that relates back to the traffic study you already have. It would talk about, again, qualities of the natural environment, and that would be the idea that you would be stacking 3 units up flat rather than trying to, you know, push them out would be, again, arguments as to why you wouldn't have an issue with meeting that criteria. It's a pretty low threshold. The way I was kind of talk to clients about it is, you know, with variances, that's a need, right? You got to show a hardship and a need, and there has to be, you know, you have to justify why you need this thing that's outside the parameters of what you're allowed to do otherwise. Special permits are wants, and you can do what you want so long as you qualify with the criteria. And again, given this to be a pretty low lift, I feel very confident that if we said, hey, we have an opportunity to go from, instead of just 36 dwelling units, up to 54 dwelling units, and there's adequate parking, adequate space, yada, 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 it'd be hard for the zoning board to have a legally defensible written finding that says this is, you know, running contrary to the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance. If they can't make that negative finding, they have to make a positive finding that this is in line. So that's why I'm suggesting 54 as the number.
To clarify for everyone though, whether you buy, you know, if we buy in that legally it's 18 permits to convert what would have been 2 by right to 3, you still collectively have to look at the collective parking, the collective traffic, the collective water and sewer requirements, right? I mean, because you have to demonstrate that
Yeah, well, so
the
you,
capacity of 54 is.
yeah, so each permit would be taken on its own. We're getting pretty deep in the hypothetical zoning board meeting that I don't want to have to go to, but if, but we would get, you know, each permit has to be taken on its own, right? They're not precedent setting. Each one is on its own merits. And so certainly, you know, if we weren't able to demonstrate that there was sewer capacity for all of these, the zoning board might say, well, we'll grant you the first 5. We're cutting you off there because there wasn't capacity, right? That would be kind of a reasonable result you would expect. And so we would certainly, by the time we're at lot 18, saying for the 18th time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to present this thing, we'd have to show that. And like we showed the last 17 times, here's adequate sewer, here's adequate parking, et cetera. But they would be taking on their own merits.
Right, but you would evaluate the full 18.
In context, yes.
people understand.
Neighborhood character is one of the things you have to look at when you're
So-
under 1.8.3.
So from that standpoint, you're presenting it as a 54 unit, even though you have to have 18 separate.
Yes,
Okay, I mean, I think people need to understand that its full impact
right.
would have to be evaluated
Yep.
as opposed to individual lot.
And that again provides a little more oversight and a little more chance for, some collaboration and some cooperation. If it was just the 36 units, it's just a building permit, right? And there's no public meeting, there's no opportunities for, asking the applicant to make a tweak here or there. It's just go to the building department, prove your drainage, and go for it. It also makes the parking a little trickier or a little better because you're at 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit. So a 2-family has to provide 3, but a 3-family has to provide 5 because you round up from the 4.5. So you actually create a better minimum required parking density with a bunch of 3s than you do with a bunch of 2s. And again, in the village development that I'd much rather permit, we've also exceeded the 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit. I think there's like 79 shown in the plan, and there is other reserve capacity on the site that hasn't been, allocated for parking. Because again, one of the ideas of village development is to try and preserve green space, preserve outdoor space. And so it would be up for the planning board to say, hey, we really want to see another 10 parking spaces. Maybe, okay, that's, going to be another 200 by 20 area that's currently open that's going to become pavement. And that's kind of the choice that would be, put before us. I'm happy to keep answering these questions about this like baseline levels. I want to make sure the board's comfortable. Alternatively, again, if Greg would want to put the proposed site plan, we can talk about the actual proposal and just,
Trying.
what?
It won't go up
Oh.
on this one.
won't come up.
It will only show up on this one. We don't know.
Are you
what-
sharing your screen?
I
Yeah.
am.
Get out.
Did you have a follow-up comment? Did you have a follow-up comment to your question?
No, well, just to point out the sort of comment on your last sort of summation is that if you do the conventional subdivision, trying to get 3 families heading to the ZBA, there is that opportunity at each special permit application for the ZBA to assess the situation and say, no, actually, we think you're running out of sewer capacity, water capacity, too much traffic, whatever. Whereas with the village district overlay application, those breaks wouldn't necessarily exist. So
Well, they exist right now.
well, you'd have to prove upfront that
Yeah, exactly. Right. If we come back with an actual application, we'd have to show you at the outset, here's all the sewer, here's all the parking, and that's why we submitted the traffic. We submit this, the traffic we submitted and the drainage we submitted is for the whole enchilada as proposed. So, I imagine if we came back with a formal application, the planning board would hire an outside peer reviewer to double check the math, and that's fine. But I can represent to you at least that it's penciled out.
You could turn that around, at least the audience could see. So it's showing up on this and it's not showing up on this. While they're doing that, Joel, I have a couple of comments.
Sure.
So I'm still hung up on 5.16.3.3. I really appreciate you doing a conventional subdivision plan. Thank you very much for the extra time and effort you went to that and expense you went to doing that. It says that the basic number of allowed units shall mean the number of dwelling units which could reasonably be expected. Unfortunately, this is not very well written, and it doesn't say reasonably expected by right or reasonably expected by special permit or what that means. So I'm on board for the 18 times 2, which is 36. But I'm not sure I'm on board for the 50, whatever.
54.
And I think I have 2 other issues too that are sort of legal. I'm thinking it might be great for us to, after tonight, for Suzanne Egan to take a crack at this and give us some advice about that issue. The other 2 things I'm hung up on are the sewer. I recognize that you can't get a building permit unless you can prove you can do the sewer, but from what I read, I wasn't sure if the sewer thing was a legal agreement or if it was I don't know, it was about capacity at the time, which is no longer true. And the third thing I'm hung up on is whether or not this is a major project, because that would be hard. So again, I'd like to get Suzanne Egan's opinion on whether that is or not.
Sure. I would ask that Greg is in receipt of some correspondence I sent him via email. I think most of it was like restated in that March 21st letter. But to the question of like the difference of when the zoning ordinance calls for something to be measured by right and when it doesn't, as long as that's passed along, it would help Suzanne articulate or have our position articulated without her needing to like go through it all. To your other 2 points. Oh, sorry, to the first point, so you'd have to go through, it's reasonable, right? So you'd have to say, it is unreasonable to think that you get 3 families permitted on this. And if you can justify why you think it's unreasonable that a 12,000 square foot lot, fully compliant, couldn't get a special permit, well, then you could be able to say it's not reasonable. But again, I think genuinely, given the condition of these lots and the condition of the city's housing stock, it's pretty reasonable that you'd be able to put 3 on each. And again, they also highlight in that sentence, it's maximum, right? It's not minimum, it's not expected, it's not most aesthetically pleasing. It's like, how many reasonably could you get up there? I'm saying I can get 54, I think, you know.
I understand your position.
Yeah,
I
okay.
just, I don't really have an opinion. I'd like to get
I'm
another,
sorry, what was your third point? I may have-
the sewer, just whether that's a legal agreement or something else.
Yeah, so again, it would, for the sake of moving discussion forward, right? Because what we're trying to get here is some input on the general plan. And so I think it would probably behoove us if we come forward with a conventional plan to, in the interim, get something to alleviate that concern. So if we come back here and say, hey, here's our conventional plan, our actual formal village plan submission, it would be reasonable for us to say, hey, based on the feedback in the preliminary review, the planning board is concerned about the viability of the sewer connection. And so we've included with our application correspondence, whatever it is that will happen between now and then, showing that the connection can be made as I've represented it, right? I don't think it needs to hang up the analysis this board does. You've just kind of provided the feedback like, hey, you say you can connect a sewer, prove it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I think that may have been very similar to the other concern that you have was, again, it may just be it may need not to hang up the analysis at this level. It may just be like, okay, here were some of the technical concerns, the gatekeeping, to use Greg's word, the gatekeeping concerns the board has. And so we come back with a formal village application, be prepared to respond or prove your way through these gatekeeping things.
Right. And I just want to, for people who are watching or watching at home, this is all in the file online, but the business with the sewer is that there was a May 2011 letter talking about a maximum discharge equivalent to 14 bedrooms for this area. So we need to check on that. And then the other thing that I was referring to about major projects is that in the GZO 5.7.1 applicability of major permits, it says anything involving 21 or more bedrooms or 11 or more dwelling units could be considered a major project. That being said, we have cluster developments that haven't triggered major project, but we just need to get that clarified.
Yeah, that's fine. I'll let Suzanne Egan, I'm confident she will agree that 5.7 is not triggered by this. The whole idea is to make the planning board the special permit granting authority. And
Right, except that the VDOD, Village Development Overlay District, is just not well designed. So we need some clarification.
no, that's understood. Again, I think if these did all trigger major project, we'd have to go pull back a whole lot.
So
You know,
I'll certainly commit to doing that. I think the analysis will be that there's some language in this ordinance that does not trigger the major project just because of the type of project that it is, but we'll provide some clarification on that. To your point on the basic number, maximum number of allowed units, again, we can't all, and we have to work with the words that we have. It does refer to a conventional plan such as subdivision. And I guess to maybe a little bit to Sean's point, conventional plan is identified because it's what the board has jurisdiction over. So it would be a little bit kind of far afield to identify another permit granting authority and for them to kind of assume that role and be able to, you know, identify or define whether they think that that's feasible or not. That's the way I read it anyway. So, and again, and then it follows on to say that it's really the board to determine, you know, the burden of proof of what you would feel satisfied with. I would think that the subdivision would be the thing that you're the most familiar with because that's what you permit. Yeah, so.
That was my concern as well, that in essence would be predicating our decision about the village district overlay permit on the assumption that the ZBA would in fact, at some
Issue
point
those
in the
permits.
future, issue those permits. And I think, despite Attorney Fafada's argument that it's quite likely they might, we still don't know for sure would in fact happen.
To that point, if I may, the zoning is what we've been focusing on because we're battling about this number, right? You're required to take into consideration board. So for example, West Gloucester, they expected some of this to require septic properties, right? And so one of the things you would be tasked with, even though you're not the Board of Health, is figuring out in determining this number, how many dwelling units reasonably could be created given the septic constraints on site. And that would be asking you to put your, you know, put on the Board of Health shoes. And that's how this is designed, right? You're designated as the board that's to look at all these, you know, different overlapping regulations and say, okay, given all these, given the health department regulations, the zoning regulations, conservation commission regulations. Again, we have a big chunk of wetlands on the site, but we're just staying out of the buffer zone except for the road. So it's really hasn't been an issue in this one, but you're asked to do that very thing you're curious whether or not you're supposed to be doing, which is consider whether, you know, is Concom going to, you know, I come in here and I say, I have this conventional plan with all these units, and you go, Joel, those houses are all in dunes. You know, they make the lot, like, you know, Concom is not going to give you permission to put these houses in dunes. This is not a reasonable number of units, right? Where Joel, you know, you don't have sewer out there and you're showing me all these units, and I know that's all ledge or clay out there. You're never going to perk out there. That's not a reasonable number of units. And so in the same way you'd be asked to do that, I think you are within your right to say, okay, is it reasonable to foresee that a 12,000 square foot lot would receive a 3-family special permit at a 2,000 square foot per dwelling unit standard? I think, you know, I think that's not outside your lane as designed. It may feel foreign because there's not a lot of other parts in the GZO or certainly not the SR&R where you are asked to do this, and this village development section hasn't really been used yet. So it may feel unfamiliar, but if you're unfamiliar, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing it incorrectly.
Are you looking for a commitment to the number of units before you come back with a real application?
No, I think I just want to, I would want some articulation if it was, I don't think it's concrete right now, right? And it sounds like there is potential that maybe through counsel from the city's attorney that it may become more concrete one way or the other. And so I would almost be more interested in saying, just for the sake of argument, pretend that I might be right, okay? And on that basis, what do you think about what we've presented to you as a cluster? And if I'm wrong, then, well, that sucks, and I'll have to come back with a different, you know, with a different village development proposal, right? But if we can we're here for some feedback on a particular design, and I've heard the concerns about these gatekeeping issues, and obviously we understand we're going to have to get through them on any formal submission. But if the board were willing, the board says, hey, until you answer these questions, we're not going to waste our time entertaining this. That's your option. But I'd love to hear what you think about the design otherwise.
Yeah, I have a question maybe to Greg. This pre-application process, does it take into consideration like the grading of the site and all that? You know, when you're looking at a typical lot, when you see it on a plan, it looks, you know, like it'd be flat and no problem building anything and piece of cake. But oftentimes around here, there's ledge and whatever other environmental constraints. Can that be figured into how we're looking at the site, or?
I think it certainly can. I mean, if there were, you know, there's lots of sites in West Gloucester where there's, you know, a lot of exposed ledge. And if someone were to say, oh, we're just going to, you know, we're going to put a certain number of units here and we think we can get that. And then we're going to consolidate in this other, using this other vehicle. I think that's feasibility is what it is about. And going back to the language of the ordinance, yeah, again, I think we're going to go back and forth with this. It seems like the board seems to be indicating that the conventional subdivision approach is and by right development is the way to establish that base number. It also says that you can consult the Board of Health and the Conservation Commission. It doesn't say consult the Zoning Board of Appeals, the City Council, and other bodies that might permit. So, you know, again, that I think the other point of this ordinance was also that in the purposes section, it was have this baseline, then there maybe are things that are done that could increase that density relating to open space preservation or affordable housing. So it seems like there may be some sort of, you know, something is amiss if we never even have that discussion about what the opportunities are to further the intent of the ordinance, just because the calculation comes out to what's also being proposed.
Right, but although a density bonus is not being asked for, at least based on the interpretation we have, the other goals, and again, there is conservation of open space, there's creating housing along this corridor along Essex Avenue that was identified as ripe for residential development. And we're otherwise, you know, staying within the design parameters for what the village is supposed to be. So I don't think that just because we're not here saying, oh, we can only get 36, we'd like a density bonus to bump up to 50. You know, we're still committing to the 20% affordable. And as the planning board is aware, the city council is in the process of likely making that, you know, a perpetual condition rather than the 45-year sunset that's on it right now. And so we're still checking a lot of the boxes. We're just saying we just want to put the buildings closer together and that kind of stuff. But we're not saying, oh, because we don't need a density bonus, we're not going to provide affordable housing. And again, at 20%, that's more than the 15%. Again, you go back to that major project example I gave you for the first time. That's only going to require 15% of the units at 80% AMI. This one's going to require 20%, 10%, I think at currently 50 is going to bump up to 60 if the city council passes it, and then 10% at 80. So this is more affordable units than you would get under a conventional plan, like a major project permit, or under a subdivision. And, you know, again, it's just not relying on a density bonus to force the hand.
I do want to, I think you're asking us to address is it feasible? Is 52 units feasible here, isn't it? You're asking
Reasonable.
us.
Is it reasonable?
Isn't it reasonable? And I think what you're talking about is a concept that's not used in the code, which is carrying capacity. Does the land have the carrying capacity, which has to do with its topography and its geomorphology, but mostly it has to do about the ability to provide water and sewer. And if this site required a septic system, a community septic system, that's a whole lot of different. If you have city sewer and you have city water, then the chances of it meeting the 54 units on this site being able to demonstrate adequate water and sewer capacity is pretty high, it would seem to me. So from that standpoint, it would appear to me to have the carrying capacity. The issue is, for me, is the statutory way to get there. And what you're saying and what the code is saying is that we have this whatever zone, this village overlay zone has not been used anyplace else, has it? It's been 20 years, so you're kind of a pioneer, and the question is that the route, or is the other route that normally would be pursued the one? I think we're talking more about the statutory, to me, more the statutory route than we're talking about whether the land has the carrying capacity.
I think you're right, Beverly. We are doing that. But also Joel is saying, just pretend we have, you know, he could do 52 units or 54 units or whatever it is. And what do we think about this design, which we can't put up on the big screen?
We can address that too, but I'm just going to the big picture.
Yeah, I appreciate that big picture, but I'm happy to give you my opinion on the 52 units.
And that'd be great. And I just wanted to address Doug's point. The conventional subdivision plan we showed, I think has the existing topography shown. I think it also shows the proposed grading of the roadway itself to show that it meets the fire truck standards and subdivision standards. And I agree with you to that point, that this site is, there's a reason this site was singled out when the village development district was coming in. This was like one of the sites they used as an example of like, here's where you could put a village development, right? And it's because you pop up off Essex Avenue and you hit this flat, dry upland area. That's just, so if this was a cliffside, there's a 15% grade the whole way up. And I'm like, oh, I'm just gonna put houses here, 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 here. You'd be like, Joel, that's not reasonable. You can't build into the side of the cliff like that. But the topography, I think to your point, actually, sways the other way, which is like, oh yeah, like you get up there, it's flat, it's dry. This is where you could reasonably situate houses. Again, you'll notice we don't have houses sitting in the wetland. We don't have houses sitting along the steep part of the roadway. They're all up on the plateau. Again, trying to be reasonable about it. Mr. Chairman, I defer to you, but if we're okay to move to comments about the design, I'm happy to receive them. And
Got some more questions, Joel.
Okay.
Thank you.
And again, I think this is a question for Greg more than you, Joel, which is on the 18 lot plan, the conventional plan, are we reasonably certain that that is a feasible plan as it's laid out? Because we're basing all of this on that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that there's some detail on utility. The potential plan that was shown for the village development had a lot more detail on drainage. And there's some areas that were identified for drainage that are now housing lots. So, I mean, there's certainly some detail that is missing from this. It's a lotting plan that shows, a roadway that would probably generally meet the sightline standards, the curvature of the road. The lots all would comply with the R10 district, but there's, again, I think that was one of the things we talked about. What level of detail would you also
Exactly,
need?
that's what I'm getting at. Do
to
we
be-
have to go
to
to
be
the same
convinced.
extent that we would in actually looking at a conventional plan when we're considering a situation like this?
I could amend my comments on carrying capacity. Drainage is one of those because our very strict state requirements require that all of the stormwater runoff from a site be contained on the site, treated and released so that it doesn't have any damage on downslope properties. And so that's another piece of carrying capacity is drainage. And there may be others as well, but I can't think of any off the top of my head. So it's water, sewer, and drain.
And to that end, on the drainage report you have obviously is tailored specifically to the cluster development, but it's a huge.
development.
So I'm so sorry, guys. Thank you. I've heard myself say it before tonight. If you go through, it's a pretty extensive report. There is some data in there as to like soil composition and that sort of stuff, which I think also demonstrates that this isn't squeaking by, that this site itself, again, is appropriate for this kind of development because it will receive, so you're right, where drainage features are shown on the village development plan, house lots are being shown. I don't think that, again, when you think about reasonability, right, you go, oh, well, they were, if you were just squeaking by on somehow getting the drainage to barely calculate out, then like, yeah, maybe this isn't so reasonable. But when you see the logs that are in there and the data that's in there, you go, okay, like they're going to be able to infiltrate and treat their stuff, the whole idea here being we're not going to make, hopefully not going to make the applicant go through the expense and hassle of actually getting a full drainage plan put together. You're going to use kind of your wisdom as the board to think of like reasonably, what can we do up here based on what's been submitted?
So I guess my decision tree moment this evening is that we're good at subdivisions. We do them all the time. They're extensive. There's a lot of work. This village overlay ordinance has never been used. And the real, impediment that I have is that in the conventional subdivision process, there's much more oversight, meaning that it's not just the planning board making a decision in a village overlay district scenario. And If this can be done in a conventional setting and you have confidence that you can get your 18 ZBA, third units, and essentially offering the community more oversight for a development that's never been, and/or an ordinance that's never really been tested in real life. And we don't have to pretend what the number is, right? If you can do 36 by right, fantastic. You can take the trip to ZBA, demonstrate a hardship, numbers don't pencil out, we need extra. Okay, that's fine. Then you go to the city council and they put their thumb on it, right? And then, so that's a reasonable path versus testing something that is untested and then having us as the permit granting authority for 54 units and nobody else really gets to see about it, right? So that's where I am.
So to that, I would say one of the reasons, to the degree I can glean the reasons from pulling through the archive stuff that was around when this was being put into the GZO. One of the ideas behind, village development, cluster development, OSDRs, which I think also have not been successfully used, is the idea is to make it easier to get this done and to not make the applicant have to go to the zoning board and the city council, and the city council refers it to the planning board. The whole idea is that if you're going to do this thing we want, which should go again, one of the big things is conservation of open space, and two, providing more affordable housing than the ordinance otherwise requires. Again, instead of 15 at 80% AMI, you're getting 10 at 60 and 10 at 80 in exchange for doing those things that we want to see. We want to see medium high density residential development along this corridor. We want to see more than 15% affordable units. If you're going to do those things for us, we're going to make the path easier for you. And the planning board, in most communities, this planning board is actually a little unique in that you have a very limited number of special permits. In most other communities of this size in the state, you'll see the planning board is the special permit granting authority for development style things, right? Zoning board is a relief board. City councils for, huge things like Gloucester Crossing, and the planning board, because they're the planners, are the development board, right? Here, it's not that case. So it's, again, I appreciate that it feels uncomfortable, feels unfamiliar, but, when this was being put in, it was kind of trying to be put in, which was, it's kind of best practice saying, send it to the planning board, they understand development, and have them be the one-stop shop that says yay or nay. And that way, we can encourage to make this process easier for the applicant, because what we're trying to do here is create housing along this corridor. And so to say, hey, we've never done this before, and it'd be more clear cut if you just do it the old fashioned way, kind of runs contrary to the whole idea of putting this thing in place to make it faster and easier and more lenient so you can get that result you want of dense residential development, conservation of open space, and a higher level of affordable units than you would otherwise get.
Mr. Chairman? In general, I agree with a lot of what you said. I think, though, my hang up, and I think it's Beverly, Jane, maybe some of the other folks, is how you get to that final number. And in my mind, again, taking everything you just said sort of as fact, let's make it easy. Let's have the planning board be the special permit granting authority. The process would be starting out as you did. I can get 18 lots on this. And we all know that it's two-family by right. So that's 36 units are easily doable within this space of property. But the ordinance was created with those density bonuses, I think, to get you to those larger numbers by doing those things that allow for the density bonus, those higher numbers within the ordinance itself, not going outside of the ordinance and saying, I could do it this way with the subdivision and 18 different special permits. Again, that's sort of my hang up on this, that, and I agree with you 100% that it was drafted to make it easier. And in my mind, the easier thing to do would be to start with, if the 18 lots work, times 2, that's 36 units, and then look to the density bonuses within the ordinance itself to increase the number of units that you ultimately do. That's going to be more than 36, but I don't know that it would necessarily be 54. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say, Sean. That was my first major point, that that we can all get behind the 36. And I agree with everything you said about making it easier and so on and so forth. But to start with the 36 and then use the density bonus. I also wanted to address your design. And reading 5.16.2, the purpose of the Village Development Overlay District. And I'm going to go backwards, but the fourth point is to promote creative development that provides a range of housing styles and prices to suit the needs of Gloucester residents. So I appreciate that that's one of the things you're trying to do. Although this does not look particularly like a range of housing styles, I'm not sure if that means just a range of housing styles in Gloucester or a range of housing styles in this development. But anyway, I do appreciate that that's one of the things that you're trying to do and one of the things that the Village Overlay District is trying to promote. But starting at the top, encouraging the preservation of open land for its scenic beauty and to enhance agricultural, open space, forestry, and recreational use. I'm not really seeing great open space on this plan. Yeah, go ahead.
And again, I'm with you to a degree in that this hasn't been tested, so I can't refer to, oh, this village development did.
Right.
As I read the ordinance, I think what it also anticipated was that some of the applicants would have parcels that were developable and parcels that were restrictable. And so where you'd see this preservation of agriculture and open space, again, and one of the ways you get a density bonus is by restricting other, non-R10 property out there. I don't think I don't even believe it has to be contiguous. I believe if you had a parcel on the other side of Essex Avenue that was 2 acres and wooded, and you said, hey, this is R40 or R80 land, and I'm going to restrict it, that triggers one of the density bonuses. It's just not the case for this particular property. He doesn't have farmland that he
Or adjacent to a creek. I get it.
to
I
lock
get it.
down in exchange for even more.
Yeah.
units.
Yeah. But it's just a rim of green grass around a development with lots of roads and parking lots. So that's my opinion.
Mhm.
Protect the natural environment. I'm not sure what the natural environment is over there, but this is mostly, paved. And promote appropriate compact development in areas served by water and sewer. Now, I would agree this is a compact development, but again, back to what Sean was saying, I'd rather see starting with less units, looking at more creative, open space, and then a possible density bonus following that.
So can the density bonus come through the village process, though?
Yes.
Okay, so the point is, I see this very complex thing to tease, but for starters, if this provision, if this way of getting housing density is in the code, just because it may not be the best written, just because it's never been tested, the applicant does, in my opinion, have the right to use it as an option to other ways to come through. And our job is to help the applicant understand what that option is versus other options. Starter. Secondly, the fact is you were asked to do a conventional subdivision because for most people, when you look at a piece of land, the way you initially figure out how much should go on the lot, should go on the site, is by parceling it out in the conventional subdivision way. What you've done is do that and then say, we're going to have triplexes on each of these lots as a point of departure. We've sort of forced you into, because people said we need to see the conventional version of this. This does not stop you from doing the equivalent of a cluster development, but under the village district rules and not the cluster rules. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, everything that Jane has raised in a more could be created with something between 36 and 54 units, whatever that becomes, that is more compliant with the issues that you've raised. So to judge on this that we asked you to do, or the public wanted to see so that you provided it, shouldn't lock you into this design. it seems to me. And there are these other requirements that need to be met, and generally speaking, subdivisions don't achieve those. Plan unit developments achieve those.
To Sean's point, which I agree with, about us having the established density of 36 units and then using a premium for additional density. In your proposal, to get to 52 units, that's a 45% density bonus. And is there any guidance in the actual village overlay district in terms of how much density there could
Yes,
be?
there's a
Okay.
specific section depending upon which route you take.
I don't have it in front of me.
Yeah.
So how much is it?
Um,
What are the percentages?
It's very specific.
It's very complicated. It says the dwelling unit method, at least 50% of all dwelling units awarded shall be 2-bedroom units or permanently restricted to people over 55, or the bedroom method, just for bedrooms by determining it for multiplying the density bonus for dwelling units and then multiplying said density bonus by 3. And there's another one too. So it's kind of crazy. But the reasons for the density bonus are for designated open space, and some other open space things, or a Ward 5-2 open space trust fund equivalent amount of funds. Oh, but that's never been established, I'm being told. But anyway, so there's some ways to get at it.
So the question is, I would say is a 45% density bonus reasonable or feasible?
You'd have to do
Yeah.
a lot of open space to get there. Yeah. Having not done the math, because it's a little weird.
Other questions? So let's go back to the agenda. This is a pre-application discussion to offer guidance to the applicant. We've covered a lot of different topics. And I guess, Attorney Fafaz is looking for direction on how to proceed, and we're sort of hybrided it a little bit, as far as what Beverly was talking about. Understanding that you do have a right under the current village overlay district ordinance to pursue that. Again, the thing that I want to reiterate is that in a village overlay district, the planning board has the ultimate permit granting authority, which is, I think we have 2, right? I mean,
You have 3, OSDR, cluster,
Cluster.
this, as far as big projects go.
correct.
You get
And
common
so-
driveway also, I think, right? So that's,
That's a good one. So I think and again, it's one of those things where, we're trying to get you to yes and survive a process
Mhm.
and produce the housing that everybody's talked about. And the uncharted waters are always more difficult to navigate, and it's going to take more time and effort, and versus a conventional plan, and it's a familiar path, right? And so, again, this thing has never been used before. Somebody thought about it 20 years ago, and nobody's thought about it since. And so things do change, right? Gloucester, and I've been here for 20 years on this board, and people don't like to, offer up things that don't have as much scrutiny as possible, right? And I always tell people that you go through the process, you answer the questions, don't create new questions, but we will generate a much better project at the end of the day for you. And to Sean's point, I understand the easier path, right? And that's fine. Everybody wants to take that path, but we don't. The control issue and building is complicated, right? And it's scary, right? And needs everybody looking at it 10 ways to Sunday. So, I guess if we want to sort of a personal comment of, we want to go left or go right, conventional versus, what would we support as a board to have a or a preliminary application, in this setting, right? I guess. So that's what we're here to offer to the gentleman.
So like some of the questions I would love to hear some feedback on are, for example, the blend, right? We've proposed a 3, 2 2s, and a 1 in every building. Good, bad, indifferent, like just that kind of stuff, right? Would you rather see these buildings are all hitting the 30-foot limit and not going above? Would you rather see them go taller than 30 feet if it meant garages? Like that sort of stuff. I want to hear some feedback as to the design of this overall, if you put some garages, you could reduce some of the parking on the street. That's more green space. Put garages, the buildings get taller. We'd be okay with taller buildings and less on-street parking spaces if that meant more green space, or vice versa. Height is the big thing. We don't want anything over 30 feet. Put all the parking out in the street, keep it low. Like that kind of feedback I'd love to hear.
I'll just jump in here. We're not going to design your project for you.
Of course not. Of course not.
But I'll say that the plan doesn't look like it has 3s and 2s and 1s. It just looks like 3s.
I think they may have shown maybe 2 3s being shown because they could be in either orientation.
Okay, well, I gave you my feedback. Needs more green space, needs more variety. Needs more 1s, 2s, and 3s.
So as to variety, are you saying like visual variety? Because we took the variety, again, untested, but we took the variety requirements and okay, we're going to make sure again, studio apartments, 2-bedroom apartments, and 3-bedroom apartments. You'll find hopefully some working professionals, maybe some retirees, as well as families with multiple children, right? That was the kind of variety of housing we were looking at. If you're thinking variety needs to be like the buildings need to look different and the insides, can all be the same bedroom count as long as the visual variety is there. That's not our understanding, but we're happy to take that feedback.
I'm not there yet.
Okay.
I would say that you need to look at the market, but a variety is important because the number of 1 and 2 people households are increasing in Gloucester, which is to say the demand for smaller units is growing, but our housing market is a little bit out of sync with that. So you need to look at what the market is going to request. And you would have to do a market study anyway. But I think it's important to look at the demographics of those people who are likely, is this rent? I don't even know if this is rental or for purchase. But the point being is I would look at a range of unit sizes would be probably in keeping with what the community needs in terms of its housing shortage.
Well, I guess the other thing is there's a simple word, variety, right? So it could talk about the size of the apartment, the shape of the building, the color of the building. Is it a village? You drive through Annisquam and there's all kinds of buildings in the village, right? So again, the familiarity of the topic is complex, right? And so, if the intent is to build housing, then the conventional path is going to be the path of least resistance, but it's going to have the most oversight. And yes, if you want to go and build the extra unit, there is a path for doing that today, tomorrow, right? And if you're asking this board to endorse or at least guide you in the direction of the village overlay district, then we're going to be taking baby steps. We're going to be learning as we go, right? And we will be thorough and transparent in doing that. But I don't know how long it takes to permit that, right? And I can't answer it. I don't pretend to answer it. We will do our job, but that's where my concern lies.
Remind me, have we walked this site? Have we done a site visit? Would that be beneficial for us as a board to do this?
You're welcome to, if you'd like to come out. We did have a neighborhood meeting where we invited abutters and other people nearby, and we had a pretty good turnout. And again, got some feedback that's already been kind of incorporated into, what the next iteration might be. And then obviously we have some different neighborhood feedback in writing this week, but we're happy to go back out to the site with this board, and if other neighbors who missed the first one or want to come out a second time, again, this is, we understand, my client has done many developments up here in the North Shore of Boston, and he's held them for the most part. And so he understands that like retooling a design to make it palatable for the neighbors, adding some concessions, adding some compromises is the path of efficiency, more efficient than coming in like a wrecking ball and saying, I'm going to do what I want to do and I'll see you in court if you don't like it, right? Like that's not his style. And so we're hoping to, through this, get engagement from this board, from the community, and try to figure out a design where we come back with an application, and you go, yeah, this looks like what we kind of all agreed would be a good idea.
What's the state of the site right now? Is it,
There are
is it
two,
wooded or?
no, it's pretty, there are some trees. So there's a driveway that Welch Lane comes up into the site. There's a two-family that passes you on the right. That's shown as probably lot 18 on the conventional subdivision plan. That house exists as a 2 currently, and there's another, goodness, I think there's 2 2s and 2 singles up there, for like 6 dwelling
Mhm.
units total across 3 or 4 buildings.
And there's
Um,
2 empty lots.
Yeah, I mean, it was a camp 50
Uh-huh.
years ago.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So it's like remnants of an old basketball court.
I'm just wondering how
It's
easy it is
been filled in.
to walk around.
You know, quite easy. And you can get up there, and once you get up to kind of where the turn is shown on both the village plan and the conventional subdivision plan, kind of where the turn happens into the loop. That's where kind of where the Welch Lane goes right now anyway. You can stand right there and look back across the lot and see where Mr. Maffei's property reaches in the rear. You can see the houses that are along on the property. You can see the houses on Woodman Street. So it's very easy to get an understanding of the space. And again, you know, there's some people living in the houses now, so like you gotta be respectful and, you know, not show up inconveniently. But honestly, if you drove up Welch Lane, got out of your car and looked around in one, like that wouldn't be the worst. It wouldn't be problematic. But if you want to have an actual site visit, I'm happy to meet you out there also and answer questions on site.
So a site visit's not going to convince me that 54 units is the right number, though. So I
Understood.
don't want to waste everyone's
But
time.
I think it may get to the point that David had raised earlier, just to get a sense of the layout of what's getting to the feasibility question of whatever is put on in paper space of what you're dealing with. So that might make sense.
I was wondering if if it makes sense or is it possible to show a plan, a village plan, basically with using the lower density number and see what that looks like. It'll show more open space. It'd show, just as a comparison, you know, here's the 36 units, here's 54. And you can see the comparison between the two and what it gives you by having, you know, the lesser density. Because I think that's where the village district, was the original intent of it, to make it a little bit less dense and more green, you know, or this is just like, let's get the max out of it, you know.
So the first part, you would take 4 buildings off. That'd be the easiest way to do it. Take the village development plan we sent you and green over 4 buildings you choose, and that would reduce the unit count by 16 from 52 to 36.
Talking to a designer here now.
Right. Well, no,
He's a
it's
step
not
all
right.
the time.
But I do want to push back just a little bit. Again, to the contrary, I do not think the village development was made to create less dense. The whole reason there's density bonuses, like, hey, do these things, we're going to give you even more than you could otherwise, right? So the conservation of open space, absolutely. Making it, you know, a tasteful variety of needed housing, I get all that. A larger than usual affordable component, I get all that. But the idea that the overall net number of units is designed to be less, I think is not a correct read of the, it's in fact, it's supposed to be as many or more than what you could otherwise do as an R10.
I think like this, be a combination of things like you had said before, you know, you make the heights a little taller, you have garages, you can get cars off the street. That's kind of the intent of this village district thing, is to have, you know, not have it be, you know, all pavement and parking outside and all that kind of stuff. It's a variety of architecture, you know, like height differences. I don't know. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I mean, to me, that's more of a creative way of accomplishing that.
Sure.
In the interest of all sorts of things, I think we outlined a few things that we should work on, just identifying some interpretation issues. Maybe it makes sense to have a site visit, and then we can kind of try to set a path for, you know, some of those gatekeeper questions. And I think you've heard some feedback about some of the design aspects as well.
Certainly.
They're not going to design it for you.
Never.
Variety, and potentially variety with building to limit footprint, to increase open space. I think you've kind of hemmed yourself in a little bit in that respect. When you mention that, it's about density, but by not taking the approach of either additional affordable housing or open space off-site, you've limited that discussion to the site. So then I think it does become that concern of, well, what are the attributes of the site that should be conserved? And the challenge is, as we know, everything came in with, here it is, and then kind of worked backwards. So appropriate for the pre-application to kind of, let's kind of start from that point of getting people out to see the site, get some of those gatekeeper questions answered about where do we start from, and then maybe there's some more iteration in terms of what things should potentially look like.
Sure.
So site plan or site visit is the next step.
Excellent. I should just coordinate with Greg offline and we'll pick a date and time.
Sure.
All right. Well,
Thank you
thank
for
you.
your time.
Appreciate it.
Okay, this is what everybody's been waiting for. No, not this one. So we have so we all set? No. So we have a public hearing tonight. We actually have two. I'm sorry took so long to get there, but, Okay, so we're going to talk about Upper Banjo Pond first. So in accordance, let me just change this a little bit, Greg. Yes. In accordance with the provision of Mass General Law, MGL, Chapter 40A, Section 9, in the Gloucester Zoning Ordinance, Section 1.8.6, and Section 5.9. It's a real long one. 5.91. It might just be a typo, right? 01930. Yeah, there's a zip code in there in the zoning ordinance. Yes, thank you. To consider a request for an extension of the cluster development special permit issued to Upper Banjo Pond LLC for a 25 single-family home cluster development at 160, 158R, 154A, Essex Ave, Gloucester, Mass, Assessor's Map 218, lots 38, 39, and 46. So I'll open the public hearing. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Once again, for the record, my name is Joel Favaza, Seaside Legal Solutions, 123 Main Street, here on behalf of Upper Banjo LLC. As you know, in May of 22, this board voted to approve a cluster development for 25 single-family house lots out on what will be called Southwest Drive. It's currently off of Malcolm Road. And in the time since that approval, we have gone to the Conservation Commission. As you recall, a big part of the reason this proposal was brought forward was to generate the ability to replace or repair the dam and to kind of have enough of what you needed to maintain that pond in perpetuity. So that pond itself is a resource area. There's also isolated wetlands on site. And through the process of this with the Conservation Commission, we have had to redesign or propose some redesigns to one of the stormwater BMPs. And that is being reviewed currently, or is to be reviewed currently, by Bill Ross, who was the third-party reviewer that the planning board used during the initial process. Now, I think technically this permit won't expire until August, but the most conservative read of it would have it expiring in May. And so we wanted to get here in April to ask for an extension now, so that by any measure, if an extension is granted, it will not have been after any expiration took place. Our hope is that we will be finished with Concom this spring. Again, we're just waiting for Bill Ross to be brought on board formally and review that last bit of the drainage. At that time, I'll actually need to come back here to this board to ask for a modification to your special permit just to incorporate the updated drainage designs. We're not changing the road, not changing the houses, not changing any of the clusters. It's just there used to be 5 drainage swales, for lack of a better word. One's been eliminated and one's been made larger to accommodate for the elimination. And assuming, and hopefully that gets through Conservation Commission, then we would come to you for that modification. I didn't want to wait to extend at that time either, because again, we didn't want that thing to expire before we could modify it. So I'm asking just for an extension on the exact plan you approved in '22. And then know that I will be coming back if we get through Conservation Commission for a modification. But at this time, I'm not asking you to consider anything new or anything updated, just to allow us the additional time to wrap up the permitting.
Great, thank you. Questions, comments, concerns on the extension?
Is there magic to 2 years? If it was 1 year, I tend to think with extensions that, you give the extension, it fills out to the end of the extension period. If you're really trying to move things forward, give the shorter extension if you need to come back again another time. Just my.
Wouldn't have any problem with a 1-year extension. I very much hope to see the permit being exercised within the next 12 months.
Any comments? Jane? Ah, okay.
I'm in favor of 1 year.
Okay. So this is a public hearing, and that speaks to people in the audience and/or to come and speak in favor or opposed to the extension. And so if there's anybody in the audience today, and I don't know if we can participate by raising hands electronically.
We can.
Okay, fantastic. So if there's anybody on the attendees list in Zoom, why don't we do the in-person people first, because they made the effort and it's snowy. So if anybody would like to speak in favor of this extension, you can please come forward. There is a microphone there. Just state your name and address for the record and share us your thoughts. Conversely, we'll take the opposition as well in-house first. If you have problems with the extension for whatever reason, please come forward again, state your name and address for the record, and share your concerns with the planning board. So anybody in the attendees list that has a for or against opinion on the extension of Upper Banjo Pond, you can simply raise your hand electronically. On the bottom, there is a raise hand button. We will recognize you and you'll be able to address the planning board and the audience with concerns. It worked. So we can allow Beverly. The floor is
Hello?
yours.
Hi, this has nothing to do with what you're being discussed, what's being discussed. I just want to say publicly that it is almost impossible to hear half of the people on the board. I just sent you folks an email and I thought this would be more direct. Everyone has to speak directly into the microphone. It has to be right in front of their mouths. It's obviously a poor system. We can hear very clearly who's at the lectern. But some of the women you can hear perfectly, another woman you can't hear at all. Some of the men you can't hear at all, others we can hear very clearly. So please, so that we can hear, have that microphone right in front of your mouths. Thank you.
Still learning, but thank you for your comments. Anybody like to talk about Upper Banjo Pond for or against? Another minute. Okay. Public hearing. So you just make a motion to close the public hearing? Imagine that. So we will close the public hearing. So discussion among board members. Again, this is the extension for 1 year of Upper Banjo Pond. No comments, questions?
Seems reasonable, a year,
Okay.
doesn't it?
Hank, that works with you? Fine. Okay. Somebody want to make a motion?
I move that we approve the request for extension for 1 year of the cluster development special permit issued to Upper Banjo LLC.
Second.
Motion and a second. You can just-
I was just going to clarify, so that would expire August 23rd, 2025.
You want me to say that?
Sure.
To expire August 23rd, 2025,
and
which would be 1 year from the expiration of the current special permit.
Thank you for clarifying that. So you can second it as amended if you like.
Second is amended.
Thank you. And we need a roll call vote or just all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, the extension's granted. Thanks, Squirrel. Okay, so next under public hearings, it's going to take a minute. In accordance with the provisions of Mass General Law 40A, Section 5, and the Gloucester Zoning Ordinance, Section 1.11, the Gloucester Planning, oh, come on, you're killing me with that. Excuse me. Zoning Ordinance 1.11, the Gloucester Planning Board will hold a public hearing to consider the following proposed zoning amendment. Amend the Gloucester Zoning Ordinance, Section 1.11.5, vote of the City Council, subsection D, required majority, be amended as followed. Section D, required majority, insert, Mass General Law 48, Section 5 provides that the quantum of vote for certain zoning amendments shall be a simple majority, 5 members, vote of all members of the City Council for all other proposed zoning amendments. And amendments to 2/3 vote for all members of the City Council, i.e. 6 members, insert shall be required, delete however, and insert for proposed amendments requiring a 2/3 vote. If a written protest is filed with the city clerk prior to the final action of the City Council, a 3/4 vote of all members of the City Council, i.e. 7 members, shall be required. Such written protest shall state the reasons for the protest and shall be signed by the owners of 20% or more of the area of land proposed to be included in or affected by said proposed amendment, including the area of land immediately adjacent to, thereto, and extending 300 feet outward from said adjacent land. Thanks for, wow. So we have an open public hearing.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I think there's this discrepancy for the amendment that's on the agenda versus the other material we have.
Yes. So Suzanne Egan is here this evening and probably could speak to that.
Okay. Austin.
Can she also speak to process, what we're being asked to do? Yep.
And here. Good evening.
Is that on now?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, planning board members. So yes, there was a amendment to the amendments submitted, and that language, the original language that was submitted, we missed. It was an inadvertence. We missed that section of Section 5 that was changed for the process of filing a protest vote for a zoning amendment. So I sent a memo to the planning board members and also to P&D asking you to consider that new paragraph. I don't know if you have that in front of you. You can, you do? Good, thank you. And so if you would like me to read it, or do you all have that?
Well, for the sake of the audience, why don't you just run through it?
Okay, so I'll just read that paragraph for you, okay? So this is with regard to the protest vote, and it says, if there is filed with the city clerk prior to final action by city council, a written protest against a zoning change stating the reasons duly signed by owners of 50% or more of the area of land proposed to be included in such change, or of the area of land immediately adjacent, extending 300 feet therefrom, no change of any such ordinance shall be adopted except by 2/3 vote of all the members. So I can explain the effect of that. So as the zoning, as our ordinance reads now, when there is a, what is known as a protest vote, right? Typically it's a 2/3 vote to adopt a zoning amendment. When there are abutters that don't agree with that and they want to have a supermajority, they have to file a certain petition with the city council prior to final action. What this does is it says, it takes that away, and it only gives the protest vote when there is a zoning amendment that's before the city council that requires a simple majority. So that's the shift. And it also adds bumps up the requirement for the abutters from 20% to 50%. So that's a change in the general law, section 40A, I'm sorry, chapter 40A, section 5. That's a change that's in the law that what is proposed before you is to change our zoning amendment so that it's all consistent with the general law. Does that make sense to everybody?
Can I just ask a quick question? It's 50% of land, of owners, not 50% of land area? It's 50% of owners?
Yes, signed by owners of 50% or more of the land area
Land area.
proposed. Yes.
So in other words, it's a majority of the land. Yeah, okay. As opposed to, yeah, all right.
And you're making the point that this is already Massachusetts state law, and you're just bringing the zoning ordinance in compliance with that state law, correct?
Exactly. So effective 2021, the state law was changed so that the quantum of vote required for adopting certain zoning amendments was changed. It was reduced to a simple majority for certain zoning amendments. And that protest vote provision was also changed. The law is applies to all municipalities in Massachusetts. You don't have to change your zoning ordinance, but by changing it, you're providing notice to people, right? So when people read our zoning ordinance, they know what the law is, as opposed to reading our zoning ordinance and reading something, and then, you know, the rest, everybody else who's read the law, the general law, says, wait, no, that's wrong. So, I mean, it's only makes sense to make it consistent with the state law.
And just to confirm, the protest vote paragraph is also consistent with MGL, with Massachusetts law, the 50% and the 300 feet and so on and so forth. That's all in the state law.
Yes, yep, that is.
Other questions from board members? Okay. Again, this is a public hearing. Thank you, Suzanne. This is a public hearing discussing a zoning change. It's again, folks that are in the audience here this evening and or online. Why don't we do the folks that are attending in person, if you'd like to come forward and state you're in favor, be positive first. If you're in favor of the zoning amendment, you can speak to your name and address at the lectern, and you have 3 minutes. If we can take care of the people that are opposed to it at the same time, and then we'll move to the attendees list. Again, simply raising your hand electronically, you'll be recognized, and again, state your name and address for the record. Evening.
Do you want to take mine?
Jeff. I'm not too good at the moment. I can't hear a thing on the Zoom meeting. Can you? Are you?
Let's make sure her, that mic.
Yeah. Beverly, hang on one second.
That'll help.
Test. Okay. Thank you, Beverly. So because the public or the citizens of Gloucester did not get the memo that Attorney Egan just read with the changes that I don't have time right now to absorb in front of all you people, I just don't think that's fair to ask of anyone. Because it's so different from what the revised agenda states, I'm asking the planning board to refrain from voting on that last item so it can be clarified to the general public so that we, as citizens of Gloucester, can read it and understand it. What I'm reading from the revised agenda says, if a written protest is filed with the city clerk prior to final action of the city council, a 3/4 vote of all the members of the city council, 7 members, shall be required. So, and what Attorney Egan said was a minimum of 5, if I understood that correctly. Or not a minimum, a simple majority, which is 5. So when there's only 9 members to the city council, 7 members versus 5 members is a big deal, right? It really is. So, and I would also ask, hopefully you'll refrain from voting on this, but I'm still reading the same paragraph. If a written protest is filed with the city clerk prior to final action of the city council, how much prior? The day before, an hour before, 14 days before? It's very unclear here. So for that reason as well, I'd like it to be refrained from voting on. I spend a lot of time reading zoning laws from the state and from the city, and I truly ask that you'll refrain from voting on this last item because it's just contradicting everywhere. The 20%, the 50%, the 3/4, the simple majority, the major majority. So I hope you'll refrain from voting on that last item. Thank you very much.
Tracy. Anybody else in the audience that'd like to speak for or against, or certainly in the attendees list? Nope.
The chair is referring to the Zoom attendees list.
Kim Smith, 22 Plum Street in Gloucester. And I agree with what Tracy just said. I'd like more time to read the changes. And I'd also like people to consider that when there are abutters in a zoning request, some abutters are more deeply impacted by a zoning change than other people are. So I think that the abutters, that it should remain at 20% because of the reason I just stated. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I certainly think that it's reasonable if there have been changes from what's been available to read and what we've been presented with, that it would certainly be very reasonable to postpone any decision until the information is available to the public as it was presented. So I think that I would propose, if there's no further, I would propose that we do postpone this.
Well, we would continue the public hearing.
Excuse me, continue, not postpone.
Right.
Continue this until our next meeting.
Fantastic. And other members?
I just was going to ask when the most recent draft was posted to the website.
I believe it was the day it was received.
I think the date is March 28th. Oh, thank you. I don't know what we're seeing that's different here, but no, the draft that I gave you has been on the website since March 28th, I believe. Oh, the planning board has a Google Drive of files that's posted on our website that has all of the information that that is available to the public for any of these items that are brought before the planning board.
Tracy, if you won't mind coming to the lectern so everybody can hear your comments.
Thank you. I can only go by the agenda. I, as a citizen and a resident of Gloucester, I look at the agenda, I look at the revised agenda, I read it, I reread it, I look up on the state website, I compare the state website to what's on the agenda. I don't know to look on a Google Drive. I don't even, I don't think that the general public should be expected to do that.
I'm not saying that they are. I'm just, that's fine. I'm happy to postpone. I'm just making the point to the general public that all of the files that pertain to any issue on the agenda can be found with a link that is available on the planning board website, which I believe is the same for the city council and all our other public boards. All of the files that are relevant to an upcoming meeting will be found via that link.
Okay, thank you. So going forward, right, for the next city council meeting or for the next planning board meeting, I should go to the agenda and then what?
Go to the link on the planning board website and there'll be a folder with the date of the meeting. And inside that folder, there will be separate folders for each item on the agenda, and we'll have relevant materials pertaining to the agenda items.
Okay, so the planning board has its own website?
This does.
You said planning board website.
Every board and commission has its own web page on the city website.
Web page on the city website. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Mr. Chairman, I think to acknowledge Tracy's point, the wrong information was on our agenda. And
I'm going to just jump in right there. We published a public hearing based on what was forwarded to the planning board, which is what you're supposed to do. You can't change the language of a proposed amendment on an agenda because that's the purpose is to bring people forward to what is being altered. It actually could have just said amendment to section 111.
right, I
It
think
could have just said that.
I
More
think that would be
detail was,
better.
yeah, more detail was provided, but again, we put information of, if somebody is tracking the process, they can go to the clerk's office, they can contact our office once something is publicly noticed. The material is available. The only thing I would say is this is the state law. We're operating under it right now.
Right, well, that's the point I was going to make.
Yep.
When we change our own zoning is inconsequential because state law rules. And so delaying our vote for 2 weeks to bring our zoning in compliance with state law.
It's not a problem. We should just
Right.
go ahead and postpone it so everybody has a chance to look at it. And it doesn't change the way we operate. So I've already proposed the continuance, Mr. Chairman.
So you'd like to make that a motion?
That's the motion.
Okay,
We haven't closed the public hearing.
so we're going to continue the public hearing.
Right, I'll continue the public hearing.
That's
But
right, we have to close the public
did
hearing
you
first.
ask any attendees if they?
We have multiple times.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
I do see
Beverly's
one
back.
hand.
I'm back. I am totally befuddled by this. It seems to be, this almost seems to be planned by, I don't know who, to make this as confusing as possible. Your average person, I am certainly your average person. This is, it's, whatever is presented to us should be clear. Whatever is going to be on the agenda for the meeting for people to vote on should be actually on the agenda that your average person checks. I always look at the agenda of what is going to be discussed and voted on. I can barely use technology, okay? I'm not going to be able to access whatever the planning board has and blah, 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 blah. And I know I'm not alone on this. So please make this as clear as possible for your basic constituent. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I will take a second, please.
Do we have a motion?
So the motion to continue was made by Hank McCarl, and I don't know the exact date.
Okay,
If we can
let's,
Figure out a date,
April 18th?
April 18th.
I will not be here on April 18th. That's okay.
So we need a second, please.
Second.
Thank you, David. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. See you in 2 weeks. Okay, next is an update on the comprehensive plan, community review of draft vision, core themes, and goals. We'll just read this into the record. Live survey of draft vision, core themes, and goals. Now on the comp plan website. Open house Saturday, May 4th, 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Kairou's Auditorium, City Hall, right here. J.M. Goldston presentation to the planning of a final Greg, you're killing me.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I jumped over you.
Yeah, right over me.
I'll stop sharing and let you finish.
Stop sharing.
And then I'll put it up there.
So J.M. Goldston presentation of the planning board of final vision, core themes, and goals on Thursday, May 16th. So 2 dates, May 4th and May 16th. So we will get an update from our planning director.
So I'm just going to plug the planning board's webpage again. So at the very top, there's a banner that says comprehensive plan that anybody can click onto, which will take them to the comprehensive plan website. And it has been updated with this welcome message, which highlights some of the next steps coming forward. Based on all of the information and ideas provided by folks in the initial engagement in the winter months, as well as the meeting in the boxes and the online survey and a meeting on March 9th that was held here in City Hall that had about 45 in attendance. J.M. Goldston has kind of distilled all of what's been provided to folks to help develop a draft vision, which again is in part by the participation of folks that came to the meeting on March 9th, as well as folks that participated online in advance of that. Just putting forward some of their ideas. Again, this is the first page of the existing community development plan. It's kind of that really high-level vision for the city for the next 10 years. So they have taken all that information and put it into a draft for the public to respond to. So if folks participated at any point, to date, they're in there somewhere. And again, now it's been kind of put into an overarching summary document for folks to react to. So if you didn't get to participate in the survey or come to the meeting on the 9th, You have all the opportunity between now and May 5th to review that document. And if you go to, again, the planning board website or to the comprehensive plan website, there is a link to a survey that you can provide your feedback on the draft vision, core themes, and goals. You can also participate in a in-person meeting that will be in City Hall on May 4th, towards the end of the process. Again, this is very iterative, and we're hoping that folks, that what's been developed as the draft vision will resonate. I think it's a pretty good broad brush document. But again, if you feel like there's something missing, or you feel like there's something that needs to be emphasized more than it has been, now is the opportunity for the course of the next month or so to provide your feedback. And again, if you're not comfortable with doing it online, or you want to voice your opinion in other ways, there'll be an in-person meeting on May 4th from 10 to 12 here in the Kairos Auditorium. And if Jane wants to speak to it, because she attended, and actually many of you attended that meeting on the 9th, you can certainly share your thoughts.
No, I have no further thoughts on that. I just wanted to say, if anybody wants to know how to get to this comprehensive plan website, on the City of Gloucester website, on every single page, there is in capital letters at the top of the page, comprehensive plan. So just the first page and every other page has a link on that black banner at the very top. So you'll be able to get to the comprehensive plan.
There is a survey, though, that's now that you can go into, that people are being asked to, if they're so inclined, to go into the survey that actually has sentence by sentence and gives people a place to make some additional comments. And it's lengthy, and people have to be dedicated who really feel strongly about it to use this instrument. But it's one more way to elicit specific information on specific themes, so that if there is any need for revisions, that they have some information from people to do that. So that's, I'm having a hard time seeing it from here, but there's a click to the
Yeah, so
surveys right there.
So on the
Yeah.
left-hand side of the page, you can actually read the document. It'll link you to a PDF of the document. And then if you click on the right-hand side, it will take you to the survey and walk you through. Ask some general questions in the beginning about where you live in the community, or if you're not a resident, just to get a sense of who's being reached. That's something that J.M. Goldson has done a really good job of identifying where we've been hearing response, which helps us also try to identify where we might do additional outreach on various issues. But again, it's a fairly intense, if you really want to get involved and be a part of the development of the actual language. But again, you also can just review the document and see if it resonates with you.
And this is the comprehensive plan initiative effort that the city is taking on, not the MBTA Communities Act discussion. Two separate issues happening simultaneously. So please do not confuse those. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
So we do have one set of minutes to review from March 7th of 2024. We'll go back there. I'm not sharing anything.
You want me to do it? No, I got it. I just didn't want to compete.
So Mr. Rosen was the only one absent, but that's okay.
Just like to say thank you again, Catherine, for making great minutes.
Any questions, omissions, submissions, erosions?
I have no comments.
No comments. Okay, let's get back there.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
So we have a motion to approve the April 4th I'm sorry,
Nope,
that's
March
today.
7th,
March 7th. Thank you.
2024.
My agendas are getting jostled. So we do have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Reviews are made. Any other items, Greg, that are not reasonably anticipated prior to the meeting?
Nope. So,
I have one comment, if I could,
You, sir, yeah?
not to get into an entire postmortem of our 3A public forum. I think most of us were here. Actually, at my table, I had a pretty good experience. I had two women that were seated there that when they came in initially, they were against it, didn't understand it. By the end of the process, they saw for what it is, not an overtaking of the city and overpopulating of the city. But I think what was evident in the general tenor of the question and answer period was that we haven't done a good job of educating the public. And I think the city has to take a greater lead in trying to get more and better information out about 3A and what it means for the city, because the vacuum that we've provided has been filled with an overabundance of mis and disinformation. And we need to do something to combat that. Again, positive experience from the meeting. One of the gentlemen who was at my table, who was neutral, if not a bit negative on the idea of doing the zoning, has taken it upon himself to actually dive into the information that's available and contact me by email and telephone. We had a 2-hour Google meetup this weekend. He's developed a 16-page FAQ document that would have been actually great to have the day of the forum or distributed to the public in the future, because again, he's not overwhelmingly in favor initially of 3A, but he's educated himself so that he is supportive of following the law, recognizes what the reality is of the situation for the city. It's rather minimal impact on any potential development. And I just think that in addition to that citizen outreach that he's doing, that we could do a better job of doing something similar. And would probably, again, based on that public forum, I think it would behoove us sooner rather than later to host another event to further inspire some education and understanding.
Thank you, Sean. David?
I had a similar experience at my table.
Just right into the mic, David.
I had a similar experience at my table where people were negative about it during the presentation, but when we got down to the work itself of the exercise, there was good discussion about it, and we had one person in particular who was just terrific in terms of moving the group forward. I would suggest that if there is going to be another public meeting, that it be made more clear at the outset that there's going to be a presentation without questions through that presentation, going to the exercise and then the questions later, because I felt like the meeting got out of control when it was opened up to questions early in the process.
And kudos to Greg for sort of getting it back under control and steering us back to the exercise at hand.
Well, I'll say a couple of things. I agree, and we are working on a similar FAQ. You know, it was going to be challenging regardless of how you start the process. I think, you know, starting in kind of the more abstract of just getting to people talking about housing and housing across the city we actually got a lot of valuable feedback and also some lessons learned. I think it's going to really take, you know, kind of people seeing some of that information that was provided and starting to see a little bit of scenario to understand it better. I mean, when you are looking at those guidelines, and they're extensive, and there's a lot of different technical issues that are really about the compliance side of things that I think kind of distracts from the what's really going on here, what's the purpose, what's the goal. You know, some of those scenarios that hopefully we'll be able to present, you know, fairly quickly will really, you know, have people understand what it means for Gloucester. I think that's the real challenge. Is you have everybody says one size fits all. It's not one size fits all, but there's a lot of parameters that have been provided to all. So, how that gets tailored and, to each individual community is different. Just looking at a bunch of examples from other communities doesn't also necessarily make the most sense. So we'll be doing two things, and we have a meeting tomorrow with Eric to discuss, that tighter, what it means for Gloucester FAQ, and then also start to move towards a venue that kind of shows people what this actually looks like and what the impact might be.
So just to follow up on that, Greg, and I completely get it, because this was the first public meeting about this, that people had lots of questions and also needed to let off some steam about it, right? So when do you anticipate that we're going to actually see the results of that first meeting and the planning exercise that was done?
I mean, if we can get it to the next meeting, that might be possible, if not the following meeting. Yeah. And the only other thing that I'd say is, we also did try to get some information out there, publicize the planning board P&D joint meeting, which had a pretty extensive presentation as well. So it's difficult. I mean, I think there's also the difference between questions being answered and just in general how some folks feel about it, and it's different. It's a very different approach. It's not the way we normally do things. So, there's some of that I think, some of the answers to those questions may or may not make a difference, but we will certainly work on, try to get a fairly comprehensive couple of pages, because, there's lots of questions. There are answers to a lot of it, but it's not easy stuff.
I just wanted to say that, first of all, we had a turnout of about 125, 150?
More than
200,
150.
yeah, I was going to say 200, but I thought, so first of all, that is a real positive that 200 people showed up. I think it's important that people who are really opposed, whether they really are opposed because they don't know enough about it or whatever, it's important for them to be in the room and not undermining, or we should all be able to sit and talk about it together. My sense were several people who came who were very opposed, and there were many people who came who really wanted to learn more. And I think that some of that was accomplished, not as much as we would like, because it's a very complex issue, and I think we need to look at other ways to get the information, as we've just said. And I think we also need to have a more orderly way of taking questions, so that, people get up and they give their names and they make their, as opposed to taking questions from the group and having people yell and interrupt each other. We just have to have a more orderly process to do that. And I think we learned a lot from that session that we can use in subsequent.
There was one observation that I heard someone pretty vehemently attacking one of the council members on it. And the council member, I thought, made the point that they are sworn as council member to abide state law. And this is a state law. And he felt that we needed to abide by that law. And that there were people there that wanted to throw that law out, that simply were against the state law. This was not the appropriate place to take that issue up. So, and I think that was unfortunate. But at any rate, I think that some educational aspect was handled. But I think it was very sad that there were people there that were really just simply opposed to the state law. And we have to abide by state law. That should
Sean,
be apparent.
Yeah, are you proposing that we have an extra meeting other than the ones that have already been scheduled? Because I would be very on board with having sorry, Greg, another meeting that was simply educational, question and answer, no activity, as long as it takes in this format.
I agree. After we distribute some more detailed information about what the facts are in Gloucester and what this means for Gloucester, I think people's questions would be a lot more focused.
Right.
and relevant if we've done the work beforehand to provide basically a context for what the law is asking of us, what the reality of is on the ground for us. You know, people are very worried about overdevelopment around Railroad Avenue. There's 1.36 acres of undeveloped residentially zoned property in the half-mile circle around there. Most of the residential development falls anywhere from a density of 22 units per acre up to 83 and a half units per acre. So we're not
Already.
we're not talking about changing the density that much. And because the site, that half-mile circle, is already so densely developed, based on the study I found, it looks like maybe over a 10-year period of build-out, we might wind up with around 160 units based on other transit-oriented zoning that's taken place and been studied by the Boston
Redevelopment Authority.
Boston Foundation.
Oh,
So
Foundation.
anyway, those, I think that's part of the context that I think the public needs to be able to see sort of plainly and in easily digestible fashion so that they're better able to understand the overall
Right.
context.
And I'd like to do that even before the results of the Lego exercise are distributed, because I feel like we've got a little ahead of ourselves. So Greg, is it in our contract with the consultant to ask for another meeting?
We'll talk about that tomorrow. Yep.
Follow-up comment? Okay. Hank, I know the Red Sox aren't playing, but it's your job.
I'll move we adjourn, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You need a,
Second.
we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Opposed? Everyone want to stay later? Okay. Thanks, everybody.